All right, well, it looks like the time is now 6:30, so we'll go ahead and begin. I just want to start by thanking everyone for being present for this evening's meetup. We will be going through a presentation here shortly, but first, we want to thank our sponsors. Thank you so much to United Health Group and the WECO for everything they do to make this event and all of these presentations a reality. Special thanks out to them. I'd like to first pass it off to Lynn, who has a few words that she'd like to share, and then I'll continue with some further announcements.
Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see you. I miss seeing a lot of you at the office for the meetup, but it's good to see the group that's here. Andy and I just wanted to slide a little extra slide in this time because we had learned that some people are having trouble finding some of the resources. The meetup website isn't the most sophisticated website, so it can be difficult to find where we have posted past events. Almost everything is posted in the discussion chain. So to find the resources, like if we share resources, sometimes we have people in the group that share links to resources that we've discussed, or the recording of these events after they've happened are always available to the Meetup Accessibility Twin Cities Meetup members. Just go to the meetup.com website, locate Accessibility Twin Cities Meetups, and if you go into past events and locate, for instance, this event, if you want to hear the recording after it's been posted, scroll down in the discussion and you'll see where Andy has posted it. We're going to brainstorm and try to find a more organized way to get resources out to you for this meetup, but this is what we have with that very simple website at the moment. Always, if you have questions, you can reach out to Andy through the meetup website, and he will certainly let you know where things are if you cannot find them. That's part of what he does for us. So, all right, next slide. And this is me. And I am the president and founder of WECO Accessibility Services. We're the primary sponsor for Accessibility Twin Cities Meetup, as is Optum Health. And we just basically give the meetup a home. The meetup actually belongs to all of you, all of the members. So because I'm one of the organizing sponsors, I do the announcements. Next slide. So just a few things. I just want to remind everybody that we have moved to a paid model this year. And however, realize that you can attend 2 meetups for free. You have a 60-day trial period. So feel free to invite friends, or even if somebody just wants to come to one, we have no problem with you gaming the system and just coming to one for free. That's fine. The cost, again, is just to help us defray the additional expenses for hiring Andy and the other things that we do. So realize that we do have those two free meetups available. Feel free to invite your friends and colleagues. Just some things that you may want to know about is that there is an upcoming virtual conference on accessibility testing called the ICT Testing Symposium. This is usually held in a city somewhere in the United States. Last year it was in Washington, D.C. This year it is going to be entirely virtual. And I looked at registration today. Registration will open on August 5th. The calendar is not yet firm, but it will be the week of October 19th. And so you can pencil that in. I'm really proud and excited to announce that WECO's Accessibility and Operations team will be sponsoring a white paper for that event this year on how to handle remote testing during COVID. So we're pretty excited about that, and also disability employment. We need you, our members, to help us develop more content for the remainder of the year. In particular, we're looking for accessibility Twin City members who use software, accessibility testing software in their work. And also those of you who live with disabilities and use assistive devices as part of your normal routine. We're looking for people who are real users, not simulators. For the next two meetups, we're going to be focusing on how to use effectively accessibility testing software. So we need people with that experience and real live users who live with disabilities and use devices. You do not have to present all the content. You're going to be part of a group giving input, possibly demonstrating on camera if you're up to that. So please contact Andy or me. You can contact either of us through the Meetup website and let us know if you'd be willing to contribute. Those dates, the software testing will be coming up in September and the devices will be for the November meetup. And then just a reminder that October will be National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And there'll be a lot of events going on nationally. I think that this year is really a landmark year to get behind disability employment, considering that so many things have moved to the digital realm. It has never been easier to afford accommodations for people living with disabilities. So if that's something that your workplace is not familiar with or is struggling with, keep in mind that those events sponsored through various organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, our company, WECO, will be offering a range of events in October. It's just a great time to get familiar with disability employment and understand it better. So I'm just going to encourage everybody to do that, because that's an important part of accessibility too. So with that, that is all the membership announcements I have for this session. I just would like to thank my colleague and friend, Matthew Luken, for offering his expertise. I am super, super excited to have him with us, and I will let Andy introduce him, and enjoy everyone. We will see you in September.
Andy, you're muted.
Thank you very much. So this evening's presentation will be on the process of accessibility. This is part 2. This is a continuation from part 1, which was a conversation with members of General Mills, Optum Health, and US Bank. This took place back in November of 2019. We are exploring how organizations approach digital access and how they use accessibility in their systems. We will have time for questions at the end. Feel free to share your questions in the chat. If it's something pertinent, I'll hop in and ask Matthew. Otherwise, we will hold that question for the end and ask them all at that point in time. Our presenter this evening, Matthew Luken, has over 30 years of experience in the field of computer sciences and user experience, with the past 5 years specifically being at US Bank in the position of UX Design Director and Vice President of Accessibility and Platforms. And with that, we'd like to welcome Matthew Luken.
Hey, everybody. Just getting the screenware up. Just one moment. All right, Andy, you can see that, correct?
That looks great.
All right. All right, everybody, so let's just jump right in. So on this slide, in traditional in a presentation is objectives. What are you going to try to discuss today? So as you all learned in November, maybe you were part of that conversation, maybe you weren't. But in that presentation, General Mills and Optum and US Bank presented their digital accessibility practice and how they were rolling it out. Lynn approached me to see if we couldn't come up with a part two, meaning what has happened since Teresa West, my partner, presented at that November session. So our goals tonight is to show you the current state of accessibility at US Bank and how we approach our digital accessibility practice, the key successes and challenges we've come across in our DevOps model, as well as the business line, and to talk about cost and revenue and cost containment and how we can link quality to improved numbers in that space. So how do we think about accessibility as it relates to design and other dimensions of quality, and how do we connect the business to that? In researching your previous presentations, I know everyone does a little bit about themselves. You know, building off of what Andy already said, I have been in the business for quite a long time, thus the white hair or lack of hair on the top of the head, depending on how you look at that. But for the last 3 years, I've been working at US Bank in the UX design department. And as you can see here, my background is varied. I've done mobile app design, worked with education, airlines for many, many years, had my own shop called Grandpa George Design and Interactive. My background is in service design, and that was used to work across all these different organizations. US Bank represents my 275th brand that I've worked with. On top of all this, I've been teaching for the last 15 years at the college level, first at Art Institute, now at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I teach both graduate UX studies as well as continuing ed. So just to bring this back to the top of the pile, Teresa presented this slide, which showed the program that we were running at the time, right? So from 2015, starting on the left, over to 2019 on the right when she made her presentation, we see various activities starting to happen, right? Where we're looking at bringing on JAWS and creating some advisory boards in 2015. Then we look at usbank.com as a platform and try to bring accessibility in as a gateway in 2016. Moving into 2017, we see the pockets of accessibility starting to form within different organizations, and our very, very first accessibility team, which was the team that I was leading, and then looking at requirements as they refer to defects. In 2018, we build our new mobile app, and we start seeing dedicated roles around advocacy, policy expansion, leadership awareness, etc. And then the concept of the value stream coming in 2019, where TOS, our IT partners, are partnering with UX. So we start creating this full value stream from design all the way through production rollout, and then looking for licensure. And so that's where we're going to pick up our story. Right? So looking from the reimagination of accessibility or digital accessibility at the bank in phase 2 in 2018, and the maturity mission going into phase 3 of that in 2019, and now we are into 2020. At US Bank, our core values and strategy is all tied to people. So what we see in this slide, in the light blue section in the middle, is the 5th bullet is we put people first. We design our systems and solutions for all people, all consumers. In our strategy, we see that we are driving towards 4 key strategy elements. So we'll start in the bottom quadrant, the red box in this image, which is talking about driving towards one US Bank. What this means is that US Bank has grown as a mergers and acquisitions type company. Many people think of us as a national bank, which we are actually not. We are a super regional bank. We do not bank in every state of the union, but we are a very, very, very large super regional bank. But because of that mergers and acquisitions, we need to bring all of these different divisions and acquisitions together. And so we're driving towards bringing it all into one big collection. As we move to the light blue box in the bottom right, we see striving for simplicity. We see a direct correlation between accessibility or digital accessibility and simplicity. The more easy it is to consume, the more accessible it is, the simpler it is. In the upper right quadrant, we see future is now. no better time than the 30th anniversary of the ADA to really start expanding and moving our maturity model even further than what we have in the past 2 years. And then lastly, like most companies, we strive to be the most trusted choice of our consumers, which is our top blue quadrant in this image. Of course, we can also tie this to cost containment. So what we've presented here is a simple timeline graph where we have a line graph moving from left to right, and as it proceeds to the right, it goes upwards. We also color-coded this to help us with our conversation. So starting in the lower left in the green section, what we're trying to communicate to all of our teams is we want to move from a reactionary accessibility practice to a proactive accessibility practice. So therefore, if we design accessibly and then build accessibly, we'll have an accessible product. What we're showing here in this green bar is that if we design and build accessibly before we commit the code, there isn't any additional cost. However, when we find the defects in the first yellow nodule during automated testing, it's 3 times the cost to remediate those fixes. Ultimately, in the second nodule of yellow, the 12 times cost during manual testing. And then lastly, all the way over to the right in the red nodule, we're seeing 95 times the cost if we find a defect in production. These are industry numbers, and it's based on an IBM study. In the upper right, upper left of this graphic, we see the number 300%. This is about false positive results. In industry, the numbers are running about 300%. In US Bank, we did some anecdotal guerrilla numbering, accounting by Matthew, if you will, and we came up with 386% is what our rough costs for a false positive are at this time. To bring all this to life, it takes a large group, as you can imagine, across a very large corporation. So what we see here is depicted our teams that are bringing this digital accessibility to practice. So starting at the top and then moving clockwise around the image, we see our accessibility banking policy. Our policy states that we're at 2.0 AA, but we strive to be 2.1 wherever possible because we know eventually we're going there, and anything we can do to reduce remediation costs going forward, we want to. Our accessibility banking office or our legal team is what is our first line of defense and helps define the policy. Moving to our next team, our accessibility banking advisory team. This is the team of high status or high position risk officers across the entire corporation, along with our accessibility experts. And they provide the policy, direction, implementation, second line of defense of the bank. But what is good about this team is that they're really, really receptive to having dialogue. And so what our organization did was we sat down with the team and we said, look, we need to see some changes because the risk officers are great at this, but the people on the front line working, the developers, the QA testers, the designers, have a hard time interpreting the policy and what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. So back in January of 2019, we recommended that we created the next group, which is called the Enterprise Accessibility Center Practice. That was approved, and we started in April of 2019. We're about to have our next quarterly meeting tomorrow, and we're seeing the team grow from 35 contributors to over 171 so far. And they're coming from all different aspects of the bank, from all different business lines and channels, and they represent passionate people that want to understand and make accessibility across the enterprise come to life, from digital practices and voice practices alike. Our Disability Business Resource Group is a group that's made up of employees that have disabilities or employees that don't have disabilities but are passionate about accessibility. And they focus on outreach programs, education and understanding. They also run our self-ID programs through DEI with our HR and DEI teams. And then lastly, our accessibility team that we partner with our TUS partners and Teresa West to ensure that we have a broad spectrum of understanding across accessibility. And I'll talk about how our team works collaboratively with Teresa, as well as where we're going to go in the future. One of the things we do is we have a roadshow when we kick off a team to use our DQ accessibility tools. And in that, we clearly identify what we do, what they do, what their contribution is. And this is just a representation of some of the things that our team does from an accessibility team standpoint, right? You would imagine we work with a WCAG, we interpret it for people, we work on a consensus-based model for problem solving. We look at artifacts and test scripts and other things to ensure that we're moving forward in a collective way. We work with assistive technology, whether we're demoing it or consulting on standards. We partner with our research team to ensure that we are testing with the disabled community in an empathetic way. We partner with our testers. We do all those normal things that teams do, like project estimation and third-party management, as well as driving towards standards. So we do have a design system at the bank, and we want to make sure that what goes into that design system is accessible so it can be reused, repeated, and create a standard pattern likely for consumption. What we tell teams that we don't do, and we specify on this very, very first word by bolding it, underlining it, italicizing it, and more importantly, calling it out in the presentation, is we don't tell people what to do, but rather we work collaboratively in an engagement model to ensure that we are understanding what is going on in the team, what their goals and objectives are, and making sure that we're mirroring what the business needs are, the user's needs are, and accessibility needs are. We don't actively write code, we don't develop, we don't perform testing, we don't write content. There are teams that do that, and we collaborate with them to unlock the best decisions for the digital product. And then lastly is we don't provide a step-by-step manual. We all know in this group that that is impossible. We work together with them to interpret how the experience can best meet the WCAG and the bank's policy. Our partners at DQ have this information that they've presented and showcase across industry, is that it all starts with the design. 67% of accessibility defects originate in design. This represents a 700 million design opportunity if you integrate accessibility into the design from the get-go, which we have done, and we have started rolling that out across the enterprise. We do that through what's called the value stream, which is depicted here. In this image, what we're seeing is the model to move from reactive accessibility to proactive accessibility. The image itself is made up in 3 sections, the top section being a series of colored lines. We explicitly tell people that this drawing is very, very generic, and it's meant to work across anybody inside the bank, whether they're fragile fall, waterfall, agile, agile with design as part of development, or agile as a separate step of development. I'm sorry, accessibility and design is a separate part of development. The central section, which is the gray section with a series of colored boxes, I'll come back to last. And then the bottom section is the dashed lines, which depict what assets or process modifiers are happening. And in this general description, we're saying you need to go back as your team and figure out what this means to you. How does it apply to your digital technology? How does it apply to your team? How does it apply to your process? But essentially what we're saying is what we want you to do is in this red section, we want you to design accessibly. We want you to work with your experience architects, your content writers, your visual designers, and ensure that what you're doing in design is accessible. If we make a prototype, it should be as accessible as possible so we don't have to go remake them should we decide to test with consumers. We see our first vertical line appearing here called the definition of ready. And what this means is that as a bank, we have a design review process. All the designs go through a design review. We look for continuity, we look for brand promise, we look for design aesthetics, we look for tone of voice, and accessibility is all part of that review. Being a bank, we have regulatory matters to go through, so we go through a process with our risk partners called compliance review, which is depicted in the middle by the green box. Then ultimately, we see the development process start to take shape. In this black box, the stories are refined or groomed to ensure that everybody understands what is going on. So designers, BAs, developers all sit together and hash out what we want to be built and how it's going to be brought to life. As we move into the blue section, we see development. The teams start working through development cycles. They go through maybe a CI/CD pipeline process. They go through QA and QEs to ensure that things are tested properly. In this section is where we bring in our DQ tools. We have DQ dev tools, which allow our developers to run an automated process with a click of a button, and under 5 seconds, it tells them if their stuff is accessible. More importantly, it tells them how to fix it if it's not. Ultimately, we continue on through a quality gate, and we ensure that we do our manual accessibility testing. So working through the other parts of the WCAG and ensuring that everything is tested deeply and well. So using DQ's auditor tool, we guide the teams through a mechanism to ensure that they're testing consistently and that they are going through all the steps to ensure that we are meeting the WCAG to the right levels. Through the tool processes, they can open defects and move them backwards through the pipeline to the developer to fix if necessary. But ultimately, what we see is a continuous improvement through here, because as they learn from the tools, as they learn from their mistakes, hopefully using our third tool, which is called DQ University, that they can learn what they are trying to solve for and hopefully not repeat that error again. Ultimately, go into production. So our goal is to go in clean where possible. We're a very practical bunch. We know that doesn't always happen. And so what we do is partner with our risk partners to make sure that we disclose any known defects so that we have a timeline, mitigation plan, and documentation to go back and ensure we're making things accessible. What we decided to do is roll this out across the company. And in this drawing, what we're showing is the phases that we take a particular team through. We try to tie it to their PI cycle. So we start with that orange box and we say, okay, when are you going to go into PI? And then let's go backwards from that. In the gray section all the way to the left, we get a roster, we get everybody's names that's on the team, whether it be a Scrum Master, a product owner, a designer, a developer. Everybody is in the mix as one entire digital product team. We license them. Then we go to the red box, which is begins. We have a kickoff and we have what's called a roadshow, where we sit down for 45 minutes and we talk the team through accessibility, expectations, their role and contribution to the overall process. And then they go through a 30-day orientation phase where they're taking their initial university trainings, setting their tools up, and more importantly, they're ensuring that they're ready to go. So that when we go and start this at their PI cycle, which is approximately 12 weeks long, in this orange section, is that we partner very closely with them. We ensure that they have collaborative discussions, that we're working with them to ensure their success, that there are no hurdles, that they can get the tools running cleanly, they can get all their stuff running so that they can eventually meet definition of done. And this is where the big change is happening at the bank, is that we are now moving into the next level of maturity, which is proving it. Right? Using these tools now allow us to provide attestations that say, yep, this particular digital code went in, we ran the tools, it was clean, there were no defects, and we can attach that to the actual story level. If we need to go through an audit or a QA section where we say, okay, now we're seeing defects in production, what happened? We now can go backwards and using a quality process, figure out what happened and how do we improve upon that over time. Then ultimately the team is deemed to be self-reliant, which is the gray section all the way to the right. So we want to talk about this phase of maturity and what we're seeing. So we created this whole concept back in December of 19, and we thought we were going to be rolling it out starting once we got those licenses on January 6th, 2020. So we've been working at this about 7 months now. And what we see is that we're pretty much on track. We're actually ahead of schedule in many, many cases. We're 93 to 95% on track despite COVID and despite the additional teams that I will tell you about. But what we learned is that, as you would expect, the larger teams take longer than what we imagined because it's more complex. So no real surprise there. Our smaller teams, where we're seeing amazing success, where we have a team of maybe 1 to 5 people, they're taking a third of the time we had estimated. So they're able to get up and online, adopt it, become sufficient, all on their own very, very quickly. And then we have more teams coming, right? We thought we were going to roll this out to approximately 50 teams by September. We have already rolled it out to 114. The depiction below is just showing the work streams that we created, where we proved this all the way on the left in the very top line with our mobile app and a team called DIY to ensure that we could use the tools, we could scale it, we could match the processes across the bank. And then we see them going through those phases. And then we went through like Omni teams and Central teams and other teams. And now we're getting into the world where we're starting to bring on our auditors in the same tools. So the joy is that our auditors are going to use the same tools that the teams are. From a team's perspective, they're getting the rubric of which they will be judged. So here we see our numbers as of June 30th, 2020. As we said, 114 teams are in flight. We started the beginning of the year with just 11 teams. That's a huge increase. We see that our teams have a 570% increase just in that space alone. From DQ University, we see 1,800 people licensed already. That's up 686% since the beginning of the year. As we move into our dev tools, we see more licenses coming. With our auditor tool, we see a 2,700% increase in our QEs using a consistent system from team to team to team. And then ultimately in the phases in the last section, we're seeing that we now have 13 teams in prep phase, 15 teams now in orientation phase, 52 in the guided trial phase. And ultimately, we now see 15 teams self-reliant and using the tools all on their own and following the processes. There's been a direct correlation, according to Disability IN, in U.S. Bank's position moving from top companies for people with disabilities, where last year we broke the top 50 for the first time. We moved to position 13 in 2020, and they are saying that this program that we put in place is a direct correlation to that leap. So I want to take you through a very, very simple learning that we did, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So what we really had set out to do is we wanted to validate our vendor, being DQ, their claims against their tools. And so we started there. And so what we're showing in this graph on the left is that we decided to take their Axe tool, which is their free product, their dev tools, which was formerly called Attest, which is their automated testing tools, their manual testing tools, which was previously called Assure, is now called Auditor, and then a custom tool that we had within the bank. And we wanted to make sure that we had comparable numbers. So what we're showing in this orange column is that Axe, dev tools, and Auditor, when we ran it against this unique opportunity we had, which is a single web page that was net new, we saw that all three of them came up with 21 defects, and they all came up with the same defects, which was perfect, right? That's exactly what we wanted to prove, that the vendor's claims matched, that what you got in the free tool versus what you got in the paid tools, we're finding the same resultant. But it started getting us asking a question, because the team who launched the website was saying that they only found 5 defects in the page. And here we've already found 21. So what's going on? So as we dug deeper, we started wondering, why was the difference here? And so we started to figure out, where was the problem? Did we have a problem? What might be unique? And how do we think about testing in this particular space? So what we then did is we ran our manual testing using Auditor. And so we took it beyond just automated testing into full-blown WCAG testing. And what we found was another 9 issues with manual testing. So we found a total of 30 defects for this particular page that was now live, and the team had only found 5. So we were like, oh, it went in the wrong direction. We actually got more defects when we added manual testing. This is problematic. So we found 600% more defects using our automated tools and programmatic tools that we purchased. So we're now starting to see the benefit of the tools. We're starting to see the maturity model needing to change. And so we started looking at was comparing processes between what we thought was our mature testing program to what our new program was looking like. So we looked at things like WCAG coverage. Yep, they both got that, so that's not really an issue. But how do you think about future updates? With DQ, they're going to do them naturally themselves, versus the custom testing would all have to be added in every time a new WCAG version came out. Did we see consistent testing methods and reporting when different teams used them? With DQ, we started seeing repeating processes, repeating consistencies, but the custom tools were interpretive. And so we started seeing that that wasn't a direct correlation, as well as automated testing and cross-integration with a repository, right? So in this case, DQ University. Using the custom tools, we weren't seeing that. They were just showing there was a defect. There was no learning mechanism. There was no, advice as to how to fix the problem. So we're seeing that, okay, our new tools are more accurate, more definitive, but they also have much more resiliency to be scalable. So one of the things we see is that, I'm going to move this down here, in the upper right-hand corner, a great quote that we had from a very excited quality engineer that said the tools are great for accessibility guidelines and validating that what we're developing is right or not. We're like, wow, that's crazy that they're actually talking about this in the way that we're talking about it at the QA level. So what we did was we started digging in with the team and we said, okay, with 5 dedicated days of on-the-job training focusing on these new tools, what did you see? And are these beneficial? Can we enumerate something? Without getting into very, very specific numbers, because I can't, but I can tell you that we saw a major reduction of total manual testing time. We also saw a reduction in defect writing, right? Because the defects are now generated out of the tool, so therefore they don't have to custom write them any longer. So there was time savings there. In the third bullet, what we see is consistent defect creation leads to better understanding. So what's happening is that when the dev person is looking at the defect, because the way it's written and telling them how to fix it, it's much, much more understandable. But more importantly, it started seeing it consistently written from QA to QA, which leads us into a soft number in the 4th bullet, which is some of our developers switch teams, because we now have different QAs and different teams using the same tool, and the defects are written the same way. There's no longer that nuance of switching teams and having to learn the style of a particular QA, rather that all these defects are written consistently in the same manner. We also see that from a language barrier perspective, right, sometimes we have offshore QAs and onshore developers. So being able to ensure that it is written consistently and using a common determination of language around the defect, we started seeing speed of understanding as well. In the next bullet, we saw just general reduction in remediation time, right? Because they'll be able to see the defect, digest it very quickly, and more importantly, it's telling them what they need to focus on and how to fix it. And then lastly, we see the education loop improving the quality, right? So as they learn over time, it ties to DQ University if they need more information. So therefore, it's educating them as they go along to try to see if they can learn from it and not repeat that mistake in the next development cycle or in a future development cycle. Oops, Sorry. The last slide is where we're going to. So as we start maturing into the next phase, what we are doing at the bank is going beyond just the digital accessibility practice within the development teams, right? As we start to get ahead of that and let that mature on its own, we're now starting to focus on other things to bring that in line. So looking at diversity, equality, inclusion, and the intersections between accessibility and disability accommodations, we now start seeing that we can look at things from a larger perspective across the enterprise. How do we solve for an employee that has a hearing need to a consumer that has a hearing need for, say, our financial outreach program? Is there a way that we can bring those to scale and solve the problem across the entire bank? So that's what we are now focusing on for the rest of 2020 and into 2021. So that is my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Andy, who will help us with the Q&A.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. I just want to say thank you for the wonderful presentation. I can see the story being useful to many of our members in their roles. And I think I speak for the group when I say that it was wide-reaching yet in-depth, and a great look at the accessibility practices at the bank. So with that, I'd like to leave it out to our members. Does anyone have a question? Feel free to chime in, or if you'd like, post it in the chat. Not everyone at once.
We know you're out there. If you're talking, you may be on mute.
This is Lynn. I'll ask a question.
Thanks for that, Lynn.
Well, I have tons of questions, but I also know Matthew, so I can ask him outside of this, but I'll ask now. What role do testers living with, I know you have testers who live with disabilities and accessibility specialists who live with disabilities. So of course, because of what our company does, I'm interested in knowing what role they play in that process for you.
So there's two aspects, right? Of course, we need native users to explain technology to a non-native user, right? So we rely on their expertise and their experience. So we have a consortium, right? So we use a collaborative tool where we all get together and we discuss solutioning and technology solutions, but we also take into account all of the native users and their feedback, right, because they have much better knowledge. And so on my specific team, right, we have blind users that are native iOS users, and we have some that are native PC users. So now we have JAWS and other technology spanning across it. I'm not going to say they get into fisticuffs as to who's better, but there's definitely, as you imagine, different answers for different technologies and different solutions. So we try to find the best homogenized answer. And we look to, I think most companies start their accessibility mission purely around vision. Right? We have started moving away from just vision into the other WCAG requirements around cognitive and motor and hearing as well. And so as we grow that, then we also need to grow our testing capabilities and our native user capabilities as well. And so we're looking to grow that to match and keep pace with that. But then we also tie this into like actual testing, right? So my team helps with the design aspect of it. And so that's where a lot of this is done because it's the heavy lifting. But we certainly look to partner